Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows or the adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Wynonna Earp, as well as the series premiere of Outcast. Starting off with Wynonna Earp, in this episode, we kind of found out a very interesting thing, that the whole thing at the beginning was kind of a bit of a setup. We see Wynonna and Waverly kind of busting into Shorty's, kind of getting a little upset, confronting Bobo a little bit, but they leave. But it turns out the whole thing, well, it was kind of to stir up conversation because they had planted bugs in Shorty's to kind of listen in on Bobo's conversations. There was, Waverly did get her ring from Willow. She's like, oh, that's something of Willow's that was taken from her. So I don't know whether that was horse shit or was that legitimate, because it didn't seem like it phased. I feel like it is such an important item to her, especially when, you consider later on in the episode. But it was kind of like that was such an important item, yet she kind of didn't say much after that. So it was like she wasn't that upset. So maybe they BS'd it so that Bobo would think it's like, oh, I got an upper hand on them, haha, I'm messing with them a little bit. And, but, Bobo ended up finding out about it and kind of blabbed about the fact is that Wynonna and Doc hooked up. Because the fact of the matter is a lot of people knew, specifically Hot kind of knew, Nicole, I'm still not used to calling her by her first name. Nicole kind of knew, but Waverly and Dolls, and it seemed like it kind of hit Dolls because, whether he'll admit it or not, it seems like Dolls kind of has feelings for Wynonna, and he cares for her, obviously, but it looks like it's more than just in a professional sense, because he kind of looked a little hurt when he found out that she was sleeping with Doc. But I guess it's because it's kind of like you're mixing business with pleasure in that type of sense. Also because he doesn't trust Doc, because he's afraid, Doc's going to end up getting her killed. But pretty sure Doc feels the same way about him, thinking he's not really 100% trustworthy. But in that regards, he legitimately seemed upset. And that kind of brings up the question to Wynonna, she's like, oh, everyone knows about us sleeping together, but, we're just sleeping together. There is no us. Which it seems like she does have feelings for Doc, but it probably just because of her life and the way she's always lived, she's just kind of hookups, and then you sleep with them and you just leave them. Just kind of a lot of one night stands, no growing attachments. Mainly because of the life she's led, where people just always thought she was nuts because she was the girl talking about demons and stuff like that. So with that kind of background, she probably doesn't get too close to people, especially with the way her life is. But, she's just a little afraid to open up. So, but like I said, it might also be because she is torn between him and Dolls, because that does come up. And it does seem like, Doc actually has feelings for her, whether he's not 100% willing to admit it, but he does. Well, he kind of does to Waverly, because later on in the episode, he leaves. Interestingly enough, with Constance's car, because I thought that was kind of interesting that, the car pulls up. I was like, okay, did she actually come back? It's like, nope, it's Wynonna driving it. It's like, He's like, it says a lot. What was it he said to Wynonna? It says a lot when a woman comes up to a man and gives him the car of another woman as a gift or something I don't remember. It was something along those lines. And I also like that Waverly kind of brought it up. She's like, the fact is, I know about you and Wynonna. She's like, oh, now she's giving you gifts after you guys were knocking boots. He's like, please. A gentleman always takes off his boots. And she's like, ew, gross. Because he didn't know what to do with the car, because Wynonna gave it to him as a gift. And it's the car that belonged to his, the person he hates and despises the most. And he was about to smash it. But Waverly is like, why don't you take this opportunity to learn to drive? Because he's never really taken the opportunity to really dive into, modern time. He is still stuck in the old days, especially considering he would after that whole fight with when Whiskey Jim set up the whole fight between him and Doc, and it's he thought he killed Doc. Doc thought he killed Dolls, and he didn't know how to operate the car to go save Wynonna. In that regards, learning how to drive would have helped him in that situation. But a big part of this episode was basically tracking down a revenant named Lou. Apparently, there's bad blood between him and Bobo. Apparently, they used to be kind of pretty tight back in the day, but it kind of led to a bit of a fallout, kind of a difference of opinion about certain things. Apparently, I'm trying to remember if it was either Bobo or I think it was Lou, who was basically we don't need to be disguising ourselves as these sack of meat, humans. We kind of deserve to control them. We are kind of higher on the food chain essentially, and just apparently, I don't know. It really wasn't really maybe I missed it, but it was never really brought up to my attention. what really led to them having a fallout, just other than a possible difference of opinion on people, I guess. I don't know. Because it does seem like Bobo's more willing to work with people than Lou is, because it just seems like they're nothing more than sheep to him, to Lou. But you ended up fighting, because we ended up getting, they were, Wynonna and Dolls were looking for him in the forest, and that ended up leading to, like, us finding out that Dolls has a bit of a fear of the forest, but apparently he says it's because he's lost people in the woods before. I'm guessing, like, there have been scenarios connected to the military, that he was like, people he like he was like on a mission or something, and the people he was with died in forest and something like that. That's how I interpret that. And then it was like Wynonna being drawn to that bright light. And it ended up seeming like Lou was kind of leading a little cult of his own. And I guess it was never really, I guess that was the weapon, because apparently it's like the reason why Bobo has never come after Lou after all this time, like, even though, like, they're kind of arch nemesis, because it seemed like, because in the episode, like, Bobo was trying to use Whiskey Jim to kind of, he's like, because Whiskey Jim is like, I haven't told him anything, Bobo. He's like, I need you to start talking now. So I don't know whether he wanted them to be in a position to get rid of Lou, because it's like, okay, it'll give me opportunity to get rid of that thorn in my side. I mean, it never came back up later on in the episode, like him, I guess, because maybe he doesn't know yet that Lou's gone, but maybe, he wanted to use that opportunity. Obviously, Dolls Dolls in particular ended up figuring out, is like, yo, he's lying to us. Like, obviously, like, he's just trying to manipulate us in this situation. So, but like, maybe they'll come up next episode, like, it's like, okay, like, now that, Lou, I keep messing up his name, is dealt with, maybe Bobo has a little less to fear, because it doesn't seem like he fears Wynonna in the slightest bit. But his weapon ended up being a skinwalker, Native American people who were able to literally take the form of animals, because it basically that's what he had under his control. Like, basically people that were part of his quote-unquote congregation that he kind of kicked out. They were cast out. He marked them with that mark on their eye, and he sent them out on their own. And basically, all these people that, like, there have been a whole bunch of them. Like, we saw the girl at the beginning. There have been multiple people like her who are all basically delinquents and runaway that just kind of got swept up in his charisma. Just kind of the typical kind of cult thing that goes down. Apparently what was happening is all those girls, especially the girl at the beginning, we didn't really see it too much, but when they're killed, their bones are broken. All their bones are broken, and then they're killed. It's like they're tortured first before being killed. And it turns out that what that is, the wolf we see as well as the bear later on, ends up being that skinwalker. From what I was trying to piece together from what Dolls was saying, is that it was the revenant's Lou's wife from back in the day. So basically she's been under his control for like the past 100 years or something like that. And this was kind of interesting episode seeing that, because we also kind of delve more into the more supernatural aspects of this series, because we've dealt a little bit with magic with the witch as well as the blacksmith a little bit, and now we've got demons, and now we've got skinwalkers. So we are that showing that the triangle that exists here in purgatory, there is a lot more to it than that, because it's kind of been unprecedented before. Like, demons is kind of the most supernatural aspect to be introduced like that. I think that the government is at the very least aware of. So this was kind of more of a discovery, because it was kind of a shock to Dolls, being like, he figured it out. He's like, okay, maybe that's what this is, but it's something unprecedented. So that was kind of interesting. I thought that was kind of nice seeing the more other supernatural aspects in this universe. But the biggest like reveal of all in this episode is finding out that the girl Eve that Wynonna kind of got a little attached to at the cult, it turned out that she's actually Willa, like their little sister not their little sister, she's actually the oldest one, isn't she? The older sister that they thought was dead, because like she used Peacemaker, and that shocked Wynonna. It never crossed my mind, because I was an idiot. I was like, oh yeah, Peacemaker doesn't work in anyone else's hands. Has Waverly ever used it? I don't think she has. Because I was kind of under the impression like only like the current heir can use it, but apparently it looks like any Earp can use it as long as they are an Earp. Because remember, Dolls tried to use it in the past, but it didn't work. And but that just like she ended up killing him, and that skinwalker ended up turning back normal. So that was just mainly being under his control. But then, like Wynonna was kind of shocked, and then she explained it to Dolls, and Dolls was like, "Oh, it might not be what you think it is." It's like, but she used Peacemaker, so she has to be Willa. And Gus kind of confirms it. She's like Willa at the very end of the episode. So I was like, okay. Because I was under the impression that they found her body, that because they were talking about the fact that she was ripped apart and everything, and I was under the impression they found her body like that. That's why they believed she was dead. But I guess like they found blood and they just assumed she was ripped apart or something like that, and they never looked for her because they just assumed like the demons just took her pieces. Well, I don't know, they just assumed their sister was dead. That's why they never went looking. I mean, granted, they were two little girls back then. Like, their dad was dead. So, like, there was no one to really help them look for her. So they didn't really think there was a point to looking. So it's like this entire time she's been alive. Dolls is saying either she's pretending. There's two reasons why she doesn't remember who she is. Obviously traumatic, trauma is caused her to forget, kind of give her amnesia, or she's not who, Wynonna thinks she is. I mean, with the way Gus is acting, it's like, of course she is, but it's like, you never know, there might be more to it. Like, I did kind of theorize it. I was like, what if I felt like she was going to come back in some shape or form, but it's like, what if she isn't necessarily Willa they knew? What if it's like something like Bobo actually did something to her? What if Bobo left her there intentionally? He knew exactly where she was, and he did that to her. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Because it's just kind of like she's always kind of like that, because that's why she kind of latched onto Wynonna so quickly and was like so quickly to believe her. It's like, because out of anyone in that group, like she was the most vocal of being like, okay, what the hell is going on here? Everyone else kind of kept their mouth shut, but that's kind of why, I guess, because some part of her was like, oh, Wynonna's my sister. Like she was like, I need to listen to her, I need to trust her. So it'd be interesting to see where we go from here. Like I said, Doc's going, but I doubt he's going to be going for long. And we still have the fact of the matter is that Dolls still doesn't know who the mole is within Black Badge. Still doesn't know that, so that's going to be an interesting development. And we saw it again in this episode when he was rushing back to the truck. He took whatever that medicine is to kind of calm whatever he is. Like, I want to know what the hell Dolls is, what his situation is. Apparently, we also found out that like he's actually from Arizona too, so Wynonna's picked up a little stuff here and there about him, but he is still a big mystery about like how he got in a position he's in, like how did he get in a position to be in Black Badge, to know all the stuff that he does know? What's the stuff that has happened in his past that he's so cagey and dodgy about talking about? And what's going to change now that Willa is back? I'm very curious to see where the series goes from here. And now moving on to Outcast. Very interesting series. I will go off like ahead of time and say like I literally know nothing about this series. I skimmed like a Wikipedia page. I didn't even really focus on what I read, but I randomly skimmed through it a little bit, be like, okay, it's kind of a horror supernatural series. Like that's kind of the gist of it. I knew it kind of has some stuff to do with demonic possession, but that's about it. I know next to nothing else about the series, other than the fact this is made by Robert Kirkman, the creator of the Walking Dead comic books and show, but he was only part of the show for like the first season or two, but that was just kind of interesting. But nevertheless, very interesting show. I'm liking it so far. Like that intro was pretty crazy. The kid just smashing his head against the wall, against that bug, bleeding heavily, then eating a bug, then going downstairs, eating chips, and bit his hand, and then start like chewing into his finger. And I was just like, I couldn't help but gag a little bit. I was just like, that just, I can't handle stuff like that. It does get me. Very interesting main protagonist. We have Kyle. Very interesting past too. We've seen a little bit of it revealed throughout the episode about his mom. It just like she was possessed, but to everyone else they're just like, oh, your mom's fucking crazy. That's all it was. She beat him, locked him in a cupboard, and was just legitimately off her rocker. And because of that, because of just the way he's always lived his life, like everyone, with that situation, he was afraid to admit what, what was going on with his mom, because, it's something he's kind of shut his eyes to, like the whole, like, oh, demonic possession, demons existing, and that type of stuff. Like, he kind of shut his eyes to it because he was like, I don't want to sound crazier than I already do. We also got introduced. We see his like we get a little taste of his family life. We don't know anything about his dad, but obviously he was put into another family. Like we meet his I'm pretty sure like the title would be foster sister Megan. She's got a husband and a daughter of her own. Obviously, her husband has a big problem with Kyle because of a thing that Kyle did in his past. We find out that basically, and it's something like their little girl brings up saying like, "Oh, you were a daddy, but you hurt your daughter, so that's why you're no longer like her daddy," essentially. So because it was like something that was brought up that's like, oh, he did something so bad in his past that a lot of people keep their distance from him. Specifically, like it's something because like he's currently in Rome, I think Virginia is where it is. He's been there for the past 5 months. He's come back home to his hometown after after so many years, and like he had a wife and daughter of his own, but he came back like 5 months prior to the beginning of the episode. And it seems that like he kind of left his wife and daughter behind, because the impression I was under, and I think that's kind of the impression they leave you, is that basically his daughter got possessed and he tried to stop it, but it came off like, oh God, he's crazy, and his wife reacted and took they got away from him as quickly as they could. But later on in the episode we end up finding out that's actually not the case at all. That in actuality it wasn't the daughter that was possessed, it was actually his wife. I think her name's Allison, that was possessed, and she tried to kill their daughter, but he stopped her. And it's like, which I don't know, like that situation, I am curious about what that is, because when he called her before, because he's supposed to kind of keep distance from her, I guess there's a restraining order against him, obviously, but when Allison answered the phone, she's like, "Oh, is that you, Kyle?" She didn't say like, "Oh, don't call me ever again, Kyle." So, two things. Either one, she retained her memories of what he did and he made her lie, because it's like you don't want to admit what went down because you're just going to sound crazy. And he took the blame for what happened. And so just it's like, oh, our child needs her mother more than she does me type of thing. I don't know. But then I was also like, or maybe she doesn't remember after being possessed, but it's like that little boy remembers everything. Like he was grateful after the guy saved him, because it's like, I think he remembered being possessed. So it's like, even being unpossessed, it's like, maybe you still retain some of your memory, or maybe the possession is reduced because he's no longer around. Maybe in some regards, maybe it's still in there, but it's like, not completely in control, because it's like, oh, he's distanced himself from them. Because it's like, no matter what the situation is, I feel like he's kept his distance from them because he thought he did it to them. He thought he did it to his mom, all this crazy stuff. Because of this whole situation, he's been reluctant to believe in this whole demonic possession thing. He's always been like, okay, it's just crazy stuff has happened. He didn't want to believe because it would just make everything a little too real. And, he was scared that he was like, oh, I'm doing this to them. But it turns out it's like, no, they're coming after him specifically. They came after his mom first to get to him. And then years later, he thought he left it all behind, just like, oh, my mom's crazy. But then it happened again because of him. We got introduced to the Reverend. I forgot his actual name. A very interesting character. I like the whole gambling thing at the beginning. It's like, doesn't seem very Reverend-like of you to be playing card games, and even if it's in the back of a church like that, it just doesn't seem very. I don't know. I mean, who am I to judge, right? But it seems like he himself, he's like, he has his faith in everything, but he's like, oh, I believe that God, obviously he has his faith and believes in God, but it's like he found his path. With Kyle, was it? I don't think that was 10 years ago, but like those years ago with his mom, you end up finding out that he was like, on that day, like I saw kind of like, okay, this is the path I'm supposed to follow, and he's also saying basically that's the path that Kyle is supposed to follow. So it's very interesting seeing what is happening in his life. Like even Kyle's kind of accepting like what he needs to do now, because he ended up helping that little boy, which like that whole thing was kind of scary because it ended up grabbing him, and we kind of got flashes to his mom doing the same thing, but it's sucking something out of him. I don't know whether that's like his life force or his soul. It never did it to anyone else but him, because it does seem Kyle obviously is special in some regards, because they refer to him as the outcast. So that was kind of interesting. I thought that was just going to be a title. I didn't know it actually. I mean, obviously, title for the series, but I didn't know it actually be something a title within the series. I guess that kind of has multiple layers because he is the outcast, especially here in town. Like I said, he's kind of an outcast to his family because his sister wants to give him a chance. He kind of cuts himself off from the rest of the world, but his sister, is trying to do her best to kind of keep him grounded, bring him, out a little bit because he's always since he's been back, he stayed locked up. He doesn't get out that much because when he does, though, when he was in the grocery store, everyone's eyes were on him like that. So it's people know who he is. So I don't know if they necessarily know what his current family situation with his wife and daughter about that. Like I said, his brother-in-law does, but I don't know if the rest of the town does. The rest of the town probably knows him from the whole situation with his mom. So, and it seems like his mom didn't die after that whole altercation. We don't get the full scope of it. We got pieces here and there, but after everything was said and done, what it does seem like is that she was in a comatose state. It seems like her eyes are open, but she's non-responsive when he went to visit her in that episode. But very creepy atmosphere, how that boy was obviously demonic possession, twisting and contorting his body around, being super strong, levitating like that and stuff. I thought it was kind of crazy, how he was thinking okay, we're trying to help this boy, just I'm going to make a repeat of the situation with my mom. Basically start beating the crap out of the kid because that's kind of what happened before. He beat the kid, he fought back against his mom after all the abuse. He was tired of it, and that kind of worked. But it turns out it's not just punching him and beating them. It's not beating possession out of him. Apparently it's his blood, because when it bit him and he sprayed more blood into its mouth, that's when it finally the demon kind of left him. And it was very interesting seeing that because it came out as goo and it hit the ceiling and then it oozed down and turned into a cloud. I thought that looked pretty badass. So obviously there's there's probably much more to it. It's probably not just, I feel it's not as simple as spraying your blood on a demon. There's probably levels to how to really control that ability. I don't what it is that's special about him, what it means to be the outcast, But I'm very interested to learn more about that and see direction it goes. I mean, because, it's probably, as you can tell, they've already set it up to be okay, he has to deal with, helping, he's on this path to help this reverend deal with, demonic possession, because it wasn't just the boy, his name Joshua, it's not just him. There have been multiple people all across town. I think other children that have been affected too. And it seems like all of them are connected because they're oh, I know who you are, Kyle Barnes. I know about your mom. It's I know about the fact is that you were locked inside of that pantry by your mom and you would draw on the doors. It's they know intricate details that only his mom knows. So it's all the demons will know who he is. So they'll probably be coming after him in full force. I mean, even by the end of the episode, he's come for me. I'm ready. But what I was getting at is going, as we saw, he kind of got arrested, because of the whole situation. Obviously, it was his brother-in-law that's eager, because his brother-in-law just hates him, thinks he's it's oh, what he did to his daughter, which, like I said, we know he didn't do anything to his daughter. It's okay, it's going to end up being that, what happened to his daughter, he might repeat and do to our daughter. So he was quick to be yep, you're arrested. But then his boss was okay, he talked to the reverend and was oh, let him go. And the guy was wait, what? You're really going to let him go? And he's just just because you're friends with the reverend. So I don't know whether the sheriff knows about what's going on with the demonic possessions and the reverend kind of filled him in, or is it just he owes the reverend a favor or something like that? I don't know. But what I was getting at is it's going to be interesting seeing him trying to balance what he's doing, helping these people. Because no one else in town is going to really truly believe in demonic possession, but it's truly having to balance his family life, specifically with his sister Megan, and plus what he has to do. I mean, something that kind of popped in my head. Maybe the situation is maybe he did depossess Allison, his wife, ex-wife. But then, maybe he panicked and thought his daughter was possessed too, and a scary situation happened with her. Maybe he tried to do the same thing to her. Maybe that's what led to this whole situation. Maybe that's what we saw was only the beginning, and there's still another part of the story that we haven't seen in that regard. So we still, like I said, we still haven't seen everything with his mom neither. So very interesting series, and I'm very interested to keep watching and see where it goes. But that's really all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.